it's good that we're on this podcast because the go fast was one of the strongest ones. It's like I was unconsciously creating things for me to do to feel valued. So even in my business, I would create problems unconsciously for me then to be the savior of them. It's wild to have that realization, and it rocked me. And when I realized those patterns and I started working through them and healing them, I just saw and felt life getting easier.
Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast, where we explore how intentional living, simple habits, and slowing down can help us build a life we truly love. I'm Kendra Chapman, your host. And today I'm joined by Chris Marhefka, a transformational coach who works at the intersection of health, wealth, and relationships. Chris is the co-founder of the global men's movement 13 Pines and a seasoned entrepreneur with thousands of hours of experience in emotional healing, trauma work, somatics, breath work, and leadership coaching. Chris has supported over 2,000 clients in their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual growth. At the core of his work is a deep commitment to service, to God, and to his family. And that grounding really shapes the way he approaches transformation. Let's dive in. Chris, welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. I just want to say thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Kendra.
Before we get into your story and journey, I wanted to check in. I do this with all my guests just to see how you're going slow to go fast these days.
Perfect timing, because as of recording this podcast, we are currently in our winter home in Mexico. As you may be able to tell from the background, we live in the U.S. Quite a bit, and specifically in Austin, Texas. And living in the city can be quite fast.
Yes.
And so we have been down here for the last 5 years, and the pace and the cadence of life here is just significantly slower.
Mm.
And it's something our whole family loves. We have so much more space and time for just spending time with each other. And what I find is when I go slower in my life, my creativity and my clarity just go through the roof. And so when I'm here, I definitely do a lot of slower things. We go to the beach almost every day, do some surfing, do some yoga, and just being out in the sun and in nature, just for me, definitely stimulates the going slower cadence for sure.
I love that you get to just take that time with your family, and you've been doing that intentionally for about 5 years. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really nice, it's like for me, it's a nervous system reset. I definitely run a pattern where I can get really, really busy if I allow myself to, and kind of get caught up in just all the, what I would call distractions of life. But for me, I just always come back to the States, come back to like the pace of everyday business with just so much more centeredness and awareness. And yeah, absolutely love it.
That's amazing. So did you guys do this before? I mean, it seems like it's kind of around that 2020 COVID time frame. Were you doing this because of, or was it just before all that started in the world?
Great question. Didn't really have to do with that necessarily. I was already working remotely. So I work from my laptop, and so I can be anywhere in the world, which is incredibly freeing. And I met my now wife in early 2021, and we, honestly, we became very clear right away that we wanted to be together, start a family together. And we committed to each other that before we did that, we would just do everything that we wanted for just the two of us to really enjoy that time before we added in children, which changes things a lot. So a big part of that was travel. I hadn't done a lot of extended travel in my life. I'd taken vacations, but vacations back then when I was an extremely stressed out and busy entrepreneur were just highly stressed times away from my home, planning and traveling, and then get there and then do activities. And then by the time I get home, I'm just as, if not more, overwhelmed. And that was how vacation was before. And so we started traveling longer and slower. And as a part of that, just a good friend happened to be getting married down in this area. And we decided to spend a good amount of time after that. And we just loved it. We loved it. And so every time we came back, we stayed longer and longer. And now this season, we're here for 5 months.
I think that's amazing that you're able to take that time. But, before we get into your story, I want to just kind of unpack that a little bit. You're in another country, you're intentionally living a slower pace of life. And I've spent some time in Mexico as well, and there is such a thing as Mexican time,
Yeah.
and nothing goes very fast, and you just need to adapt to the culture. It is what it is. But there are many places around the world that are like that. And so we as Americans, if you're listening to this from another country, we know that we may be perceived as, having a culture that is just go, go, go all the time. And, there are many Americans who live their life that way. But I think more and more of us are starting to realize the good life
Hmm.
means knowing when to go slow and when to go fast. And the more you can balance that to make your life sweeter, I think it's where you really do win
Yeah.
the best of both worlds.
I I fully agree. And it wasn't until I really started traveling that I actually fully embraced it. And it was just everything that I learned growing up, and every circle of business and entrepreneurs that I was in was just go as fast as possible. And that's the roadmap that I took for quite a while. And we also, in addition to Mexico, we've spent the last 4 summers in Europe, and it's similar. There's some differences, but there's a lot of similarities. And there's just a thirst for living. It's just like living for living's sake and not living for work, which is how I lived the first 33 years of my life for sure. And yeah, just long meals with friends and family, and kids are integrated into everything. You don't really, I didn't experience so much of the segmentation of families where we ship the elderly people away and the kids are in daycare or in school. It was just like everyone was integrated, and everyone, at least that we interacted, was generally more happy than a lot of people that I experienced in the States, in America. And yeah, it took some time for me to like unwind this value system of just go, 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 like really work your life away. I mean, it's true. Most people do that and then they quote unquote retire and they lack purpose in their life and oftentimes die early, and they don't really get to enjoy this thing that they've worked their whole life for. And so I really, about 7, 8 years ago, made a commitment to myself that I was going to love my life every day and seek to love it every moment. And I was going to design it so that I could enjoy it now and not for some future moment that I would hope would happen. And I unfortunately look at so many retired people when they have the wealth and they've now accumulated all from all this work, and they don't have the bodies or the energy to actually enjoy it and do the things that they want to. And so I made that commitment. And fortunately, when I met my wife, she was on the exact same page. And yeah, that's just how we've chosen to live.
Yeah, I want to put a finer point on that. To live, it can look different for everybody. But once you make that conscious decision of how you want to live your life, then you work to make sure you create
Mhm.
that. And some of us get there quicker than others, but then we have to learn to slow down to enjoy it. So, can you just walk us back to that time in your life where you had decided that you wanted to become an entrepreneur and how that unraveled for you? And then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. This was actually back when I was 20, 21, 22 years old. I had graduated college. I had actually got a job in finance in 2008, which was like a really terrible time for a lot of reasons in the economy. And to put it bluntly, just hated it. I hated what I was doing. Felt soulless. I felt empty inside. And back then, I wouldn't have called it intuition, but I just had this like feeling that like, God, there's got to be something more. And I did what a lot of people thought was crazy at the time, and I quit that job. And that was my like first big step into becoming an entrepreneur. I said, I don't really even know where I'm going to go with this. I didn't necessarily have a plan, but I knew that I had big dreams, and I knew that I wanted to help people, and I knew that I was a hard worker and I was smart, and I was just committed to figuring it out. And I didn't know what that meant, but that was Yeah, that was right around May of or April of 2009. And I was very broke for a long time in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I was working other jobs to help support it. But I knew, I just look back to those times when I was sleeping on the couch of my office because I couldn't afford both the business location and my house, or I was like trading handyman work for living in someone like renting a room. I look back on it and I was working so hard, but I was so happy. And so there was definitely a shift there, not quite yet into the lesson of going slow, but it was very much my lesson of designing a life that I actually want and look forward to and wake up excited for. That's when it really started to set in. And I was the first entrepreneur in my whole extended family. It wasn't like a thing that I was aware of. But fortunately, I actually had some close friends, and both through high school and college, that their parents or one of their parents had blaze that trail, and they just were living differently. All the times that I spent with them and their family, they just seemed to be living differently, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. But the overarching thing was they just were designing their life and they were entrepreneurs. And I was like, okay, I want that. Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking about, you in your early years, you were saying how hard you were working, but you were so happy that it's like that sweet spot of being in the flow, what people talk about, where it's like if you're searching, searching for that passion, you find it, and then it intersects with how you can make that life that you want. That's that flow that people are searching for. And, you know, at that moment, when did you start to realize that you were going to be able to reach your dream?
Yeah, great question. I started to realize material success at first, and it was actually on the eve of my 30th birthday. I used to do this habit, this practice. I still do it, but it just looks very different now. Back then, it was I would set goals. My birthday's in December, so it always worked out well for like planning the next year. And I would plan for personal things, playing for business. And often back time, it was oftentimes really material. And I really realized that when I was sitting down to do it right before my 30th birthday, I looked back on all the spreadsheets that I'd kept, and I had hit pretty much everything that I said I wanted to do. Really, in my life, they were some of my biggest goals. I had achieved them. And that was the wake up call that maybe there was something more, because I started to ask, I was like, okay, so what do I do for next year? Okay, do I just set a bigger goal, like put another zero at the end of it, or like, and it felt really empty. And I'd built a few great businesses that I was really proud of. And I loved what I had done. But that was the first time when I went to do this exercise that I was started to question, like, what else? What does this all matter? And that set me on a few years, about 3 years of asking that question for myself. And it helped it was facilitated by the fact that just 3 months after that experience, I had a health scare, which led to me really slowing down. And at this time, at 30 years old, I would say I was at the peak of my entrepreneurial career, maximum stress, minimum sleep. I had just gotten married, but I had put my relationship so far down the priority list behind all these other material goals that my relationship was so struggling. And then I was basically sat down and just said like you gotta, and I say at the time I started to hear these voices that weren't necessarily mine. And it was like, you got to make a change. And I was like, what is that? I've never heard that voice before. And you've got to slow down. You've got to take care of yourself, take care of your body. And it was like a stress induced brain injury, and it happened while I was competing in CrossFit. It really scared me. It was the first time in my life I feared for my life. And then the dark months that followed that led me to question everything, including my life. And it was a really dark time. And even worse than that, I didn't know how to talk about emotions. I really did well of operating in the brain and all the analytical stuff, but I didn't know how to talk about how I felt. And so I kept most of that inside for a long time. And it wasn't until about 3 years later that I finally got help. And that was after 3 years of my life, both consciously and unconsciously burning to the ground. The businesses started to suffer because I couldn't work as hard anymore. And I realized that just my go, go, go was keeping things status quo and afloat. And when I couldn't do that anymore, things started to suffer. I also really believe I started to self sabotage. So I was starting to blame all this that I had created on now, like what was happening to me. And so there was both the conscious and unconscious, and a lot of my identity fell away. I saw myself as this really hardworking, like striving, achieving all the things we think of as like alpha American values. And I now couldn't do it anymore. I also didn't have my health the way that I had before. I'd been an athlete my whole life, and I'd really appreciated that part of myself, and I couldn't even work out anymore. And so it scared me. I didn't know what was next. And that was really the period where I started to question everything. And yeah, it was a slow and painful process. It definitely wasn't a comfortable one. And in it, like I said, I finally got some support, got some coaching, got some help, and I was able to start unpacking all these patterns that just kept running. And for me, it's good that we're on this podcast, because the go fast was one of the strongest ones. It's like I was unconsciously creating things for me to do to feel valued. So even in my business, I would create problems unconsciously for me then to be the savior of them. It's wild to have that realization, and it rocked me. And when I realized those patterns and I started working through them and healing them, I just saw and felt life getting easier. It was getting easier and it was getting better. And so I just kept doubling down on that, and really still do to this day. I mean, I think my personal development journey will continue indefinitely.
Yeah, so many things that I want to unpack, but it sounds like there was the time right before you had your health crisis where you were getting whispers of you need to slow down, you need to slow down, and you didn't know what that was. You kept pushing. Then you had your moment with health it was a scare. It was while you were doing CrossFit, and that caused you to go down a completely different path. I mean, that was I think many of us have had moments like that, not maybe to that degree, but we've had moments where we've been hearing something in the back of our mind telling us, you may not want to do that. You may need to do this differently. And when we ignore it, that's when it's going to get louder. Unfortunately, sometimes it looks like a physical situation.
Yeah, and frankly, they started as whispers, but I was stubborn and hard-headed, and they were getting loud signs. Like the
Mm,
whole year prior to this major health crisis happening, I was getting injured like consistently, like every month. I would break something here, I would tear something there, and like that year my sleep was just, I don't think I really slept deeply that whole year. I was just always stressed. My mind was always going. There were so many signs,
mm.
and I just was refusing to listen to them. And they kept getting louder and louder until they were unignorable, honestly.
Yeah. And then you no longer can ignore because your body is needing rest, needs recovery. You're going through this health crisis. So at this point, some refer to this moment maybe as a dark night of the soul. You had to pay attention to it. You had to do the inner work and the outer work of recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely what it was for me. And I laugh because I use that term all the time. But for me, it was like a dark year of the soul, dark
Mm,
multi-year of the soul, because I didn't immediately ask out for help. I even when it happened, I kept it inside. And so it was a multi-year period of just a lot of darkness for me and a lot of uncertainty. And this was coming from, again, someone who I always felt like I had it all together. I told everyone I had it all together. I thought of myself as this like poster child of like control of my life and all these things. And it just, none of it was true. And that was just the way that I kept it all feeling safe for me and comfortable, but it really wasn't. And it just unraveled and unraveled and unraveled. And yeah, so many signs. At this time, my dad was starting to have health issues as well, heart issues. And I remember reflecting on his mortality and my own mortality. And that was like the thought that really was with me for those few years, is like, is this how I want to live my life? And if it ended tomorrow, like, would I be happy with that? Like, would I be happy with what I gave, what I served, like my impact? And even though I had done a lot, the answer wasn't a clear yes. And so it was like that question that really got to some of those deep layers and continue to, honestly.
Yeah. So besides the self-reflection, looking at, parallels of your life with your father's life and health and choices and working with a coach, where did you start to really turn that corner?
Yeah, I remember it vividly. I was traveling back from, it was actually Thanksgiving, funny enough. We're recording this right around Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving 2018. And traveling back from a road trip with my then wife, different than my wife today. And I remember crossing the border. We were living in Florida at the time, crossing the border back into Florida. And I just had what I guess some people would call like a panic anxiety attack. And I just started freaking out and I started bursting into tears. And I wasn't someone who in the past cried really much in my adult life. And so it was like, it was so overwhelming. And what I realized as I pulled over and we stopped and she was just comforting me, it was just because it was a huge surprise for her. But I had this realization that all of this that I'd built, all that I had achieved, I didn't want to go home to it. I just had this sense that I wanted to turn around and go anywhere, just escape it, eject from it. And it didn't matter. I said, I don't care about any of it. I just don't want to go back. And that was the moment that I decided. I was like, okay, I can't keep living like this. And my then wife was in the middle of a program that was like around emotional and child healing and healing our subconscious patterns. And in a way, I was starting to get jealous. She was getting happier. She was feeling lighter. And I was like, okay, I gotta do something. And that was right there. And so I did that in January of 2019. And then I started attending some retreats and started doing some deeper healing work. And so like January 2019, end of 2018 was when I finally made the decision, because that's really all that was missing. All the signs were there, all the feelings were there. I just didn't fully decide like, okay, I'm going to do something about this. And that's when it happened.
So it seems like, or it sounds like, based on what you're describing, is that your body had to catch up to your mind and your mind had to listen to the signs. Everything needed to come together. It was almost like a somatic response of just getting all
Absolutely.
those emotions out.
Yeah, it felt like the best analogy was like it was like a compressed air or like or a champagne bottle is a good analogy. And it just had enough easing of the top that when it popped off, it just all started coming out. And it continued for quite a bit. Like that whole year of healing was just like so much emotion, like so much. And it was because I'd suppressed it my entire life.
I would say kudos to you for allowing it to come up and like working through it. Cause I think many people listening or watching on YouTube may have been in a situation like this and we push those emotions down because we don't want to deal with them. And that makes it worse. We've got to work through it at some point. So do you want to do it in the moment and that whatever the moment is, or do you want to do it 5 years from now when it's worse, however many years? So I think it's amazing that you were able to just work through that.
Thank you. And I have enormous compassion and empathy for people that experience that because it was absolutely me for my whole life. And I understand all of the ways that we protect ourselves from feeling those emotions. There's the ways that we let them seep out in our life that are unhealthy. There's the ways that we turn them on ourselves. There's the ways that we suppress them and pack them down. There's the ways that we distract away from them. That's a huge one in our society today is we go to things really unconsciously just to not be present with ourselves. And I did them all. I'd be the first to raise my hand for every single one of them because I was doing it. And I also will be the first one to say that on the other side of going into them is the most liberating, the most freeing. And really, I feel the sense of quote unquote control that I was always seeking, that I thought I had. I feel like I have more control after going through that darkness and going through those uncomfortable emotions. And I wouldn't personally call it control, but it's more of a sense of I have the awareness to feel when they're coming on, the tools to deal with them, and the willingness to go into them. And so when I do that, they no longer control me, they being my thoughts, my emotions, my stories, and they no longer like have a hold on me. So I finally have the steering wheel. I finally have the reins of my own life, and I'm not being really like a puppet to these internal things that are happening inside of me anymore. Yeah, it's an incredibly empowering thing. That's the word that I would use, is it's incredibly empowering to finally come to that place to where I no longer am that puppet or the slave to the stories.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, to me, this story of almost like death and rebirth, now that you've come through that process of introspection and then making changes in your life and growing and being aware that it's going to continue. It's not just a one and done, like it's an ongoing process. I know now you're helping others go through this as well. Can you talk a little bit about what practices guide your approach to showing up for others, for yourself? You're a father, you're a partner. I'm sure you're collaborating with others these days. So, how are you working through these growth steps now?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a career path that I never would have guessed, imagined, or even um, saw coming. It really chose me on the other side of doing all this stuff. And I, it came from a place of deeply wanting to share what was impactful for me and what really changed my life for the better. And better is such an understatement. And so I wanted to share them. For me, there's two to three like foundational kind of tools or practices that really kind of weave into everything that I do. The first one is absolutely the breath. And breath was something that I got into really early in my journey. Even before my journey as an athlete, I was coached on how to breathe better so that I could run longer or train longer. And so I was already aware of conscious breathing. And it's something that a lot of people won't even really realize, is that we, of course, will breathe involuntarily if we don't breathe voluntarily. Our body does that for us. Thank you, body. And also, we have the capacity to affect the depth and the cadence of our breath, and we get to direct it if we're conscious of it. And so I started experimenting with many different breath modalities and just seeing and experiencing all the benefits. And for me, it's like the topic of your podcast. It slowed me down. It got me into a regulated nervous system. It allowed me to feel safe to explore my body, or the sensations that were happening within it. So it was kind of the access point. It was like the first thing that I really had to commit to. And then once I was doing the breath practice, I started getting more into like an awareness practice. Some people call it like a mindfulness or a meditation. I've gone through many different modalities. And what I realized in that process, in that step, is that there's a part of me that can simply just be aware, and it can just simply observe the thoughts or observe the feelings. And it's almost as if this wiser part of me, it's like this wise old grandpa part that can just sit and watch it. And so as I practiced that with the breath and the awareness, I realized I could go through like the heaviest of emotions, the deepest feelings, and the deepest fear too, and just be with it and just let it be there and breathe with it. And then the third part was I got a lot of training in the somatic modalities, in how to embrace and work with the sensations in the body that we call feelings. And those feelings will be intertwined with our thoughts. Those thoughts become our stories. They become our belief systems. They become our character. They become our personality. And so when I combined all of those together, I really got a set of tools that allowed me to downregulate the nervous system, to become aware of our deepest patterns and the things that are truly running our life, and then how to reprogram them at the deepest level. And so that's like the foundation of like my coaching and mentorship. And, I primarily work with people that were exactly me just 10 years ago, mostly because I deeply understand them. I deeply understand what they're going through. And there are people that are caught up in the doing. They're caught up in the going fast. They're caught up in the high stress, high distraction lifestyle. I can relate to them. I can see them. I can really feel what they're going through, I can still tap into that part of myself. I still get caught up in it. I'm not at all perfect. I get caught up in the go, go, go for sure, especially being a father, and life gets more challenging. So I can kind of slip back into those patterns myself. And I also know what's possible when you take someone that has that drive, that has that, like, they want to create something big in the world, and then that they clean some things up inside of them, and they can now direct that energy to something that better serves everyone, including themselves, and is more aligned with them. And so that's why I'm incredibly passionate about working with entrepreneurs, like very high drivers, because they understand that when they're on 100%, like the impact that they can actually have. I call it the a lot of people use ROI, return on investment. I call it the ripple of impact. You can actually measure the ripples that go out from one person doing their work. And those ripples go out very, very far, farther than we think. And that's like my driving reason why I do this, is that I know when I work with and we move through some of these deep things, that impact is going to ripple out like far beyond anything we'll ever see or hear.
I love that you've taken the ROI and made it, because it is true. What we do in the world to affect the collective is a ripple effect. We can either do negative things or we can do positive things. They can be small or they can be big or they can be in between. But whatever we do, we are making an impact, whether we realize it or not. Yeah, I love
Absolutely.
that. So thinking back to where you shared, and I've had a similar moment where you go back and you're getting ready to make new goals. You're reviewing everything that's happened in that year. And we're all coming up to that if you're watching this in the next couple of months or 5 years from now. Last quarter of the year is where we start to kind of take stock and we review, and then we decide what we want to do next. And if we're a super attractor or we're a highly driven entrepreneur or professional, amazing parent, whatever we're proud of, we can probably look back and see all the things that we've accomplished that we set out to do. And that's where you should celebrate. You should say,
Mhm.
wow, that's amazing that I've accomplished all the things that I wanted to. Now what? And that's where you took it to the next level. Although you had to go through your dark night of the soul, dark year of the soul, I think your higher self was realizing, yeah, let's go. We got this. We're just going to have to do a little bit deeper work, but we're going to get to the other side and we're going to do what we really want to do.
Absolutely. And I have a couple like affirmations that I use and I share all the time. And the first one is more like a belief that I hold around transformation and personal development. And I use it for myself all the time, but I also use it for my clients. And I say that if you're being shown something or a challenge presents in your life, there is some part of you, some part deep in your soul, deep in your being, that is ready to face it. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it. And so it's a very impact to hold, because if I can stay connected to that, it doesn't matter how big the challenge is. I know that maybe I don't know the outcome. Maybe I don't know how long it's going to take, how hard it's going to be. I don't know what's going to be involved, but I know that I'm ready to go into it. I know I'm ready to go towards it. And so that's the first thing I would share with people that are experiencing challenge in their life, is that there's some part of you that's ready. There's a courageous part of you that's like waiting to come online and like step forward. And then the second one is one that I've started using around like the goal setting and around how I orient like planning for myself and my clients. And it's this or better. And so I take all of the celebrations, I take the beautiful moments, I take the peak experiences and the time where I was feeling the most alive, and I say this or better. And I don't always know what the better is, but that's the starting point. And so what we go from there is, what were those experiences? Like, what were the things that made you come alive that you actually want more of? And then what we really parse out of that is what's really important to you, not what you say is important or you tell your boss is important, or sometimes you tell your friends or even your spouse is important, but like what's really important to you when you look at it from that lens. And when you look at it through there, it's oftentimes not the thing that people are setting goals for. Yeah. And so I start orienting towards the things that make me feel alive, the things that excite me, the things that light my body up with electricity. And if I died the next moment, I would be happy. I look to those things, the peak fulfillment moments, and I say, okay, what's true about these? Like what was happening? What was I experiencing? What was I doing? And then I frame my future planning around those important things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've recently stepped away from a career that was almost 30 years in education. And I think I know I was meant to do that. I needed to learn from people in that space. And I needed to know that I was capable of being a leader and learning things and being an educator and all that and helping people. That was the bottom line. I wanted to help people. And I did. But then, like you said, you start to realize what's really important. Do I want to be helping other kids? Do I want to be pouring into other children, or do I want to spend time with my own? And that's where I had to make that decision to spend the next so many years really pouring into my own children, spending time with them, being at home. So figuring out a way to work from home so I could still do things that I love to do that light me up, but I can also use my values to guide how I want to live my life. And so I've chosen to work from home now. And it looks very different. And I'm not making as much money as I was before, but that's not what I need. I need to be with my kids and be with my family. So that totally aligns with how you have led others to start to realize what are your true values and do they align with what you're doing in life?
Yeah, there's a question that I ask every one of my clients at some point in this planning process, because that inevitable question always comes out, like, oh, what about money? Like, what if I'm not working 80 hours a week? How am I going to make as much? And the question I ask is one that I got from one of my mentors, is to live this dream life that we're designing together, that we're creating, that's coming alive in you. Like, how much is enough? Like, how much is that really? And so we come up with like a few different numbers. One's like a wild, like stretch one, one's like a comfort one, and one's like a bare minimum one. And so to actually outline that gives relief to the part of the brain that is just stuck in this more pattern, because I think everyone understands this logically, but there is never enough money if you don't believe that there's enough. There's always more. You can look at the richest people in the world, and if they're in the pursuit of more, they will always be thinking they don't have enough because it's infinite. And so until you have some like guardrails around it in your mind, you're always going to want more. Like, if you're operating from that place, it seems obvious, but it's not obvious to most people. And it leads us to keep pursuing something that isn't necessarily important to us. Yeah, what money can afford us can be important to us, but it's important to make those things the actual important ones and not the money that creates those things. Because what a lot of people realize in this journey is that they already have right in front of them so much of what's important to them, but they're putting this energy on something else in the pursuit that it's going to buy some future thing that's going to get them important happiness or whatever. It's wild when we really unpack it. And so it's important to know, like, okay, what is enough? Like, what would be good? If I could do all these other things that are my dream life and I make half as much as I do today, would that be okay? If you'd make 10%, if it's the same amount, whatever, as long as we define it and we get some sort of idea around it. And what's funny is as my clients move in the direction, there is sometimes a little dip. Sometimes they choose to do a massive change. They shut down a business or whatever, and there's a little dip. But what always happens, because I usually work on longer term with a lot of my mentoring clients, is that when they start living the life that they dreamed of, very quickly things start lining up in their favor, that part of their life starts just coming in. And they're not necessarily putting all their attention on money and income, but it starts coming in the more and more they get realigned. And so I think about it as two ways. Like, money's a thing that you can force your way into, you can work your way into, you can hustle your way into, and you can definitely do that. And it comes with some side effects. Money's also a thing that you can align into. You can align your life so that it flows to you and through you when you're living to your values, to what's important to you. And it's definitely a scarier path, because there's a linear way to working your way to money. Like, there's plenty of examples, like you can do it. And also most of those examples end up miserable. And so
Mm-hmm.
I did myself. And so I started choosing the other path. And I started choosing to prioritize the important things first. And, I'm fortunate enough that I've kind of passed the point where, okay, the other part catches up, because I did take a huge pay cut from when I sold my businesses and I left that like high driving world, and it scared the hell out of me, to be honest. And I had to be with that fear. And also I was okay with it. I was honestly okay with
Mm-hmm.
it, because even with all that possessions and money and prestige and achievements, I still felt empty. So I had enough wherewithal to realize like that wasn't it. And if I kept adding zeros and if I kept adding more, it wasn't going to be it either, because that's the pursuit I did for 10 years. And at no
Yeah,
point when I hit the financial goal did it fully fill this black hole. And so I had enough evidence to say that there actually is no thing that's going to fill that black hole if I always think that there's a black hole that needs to be filled.
for sure. Yeah, more money doesn't mean that you're going to be happy, right? And we've heard that more money doesn't equal happiness. You've got to decide right now, if you're listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube, you've got to decide, what do you value, and what do you want your life to look like? And the money will come if you are doing what you love and you are aligning your life with your values, beliefs, and, making sure that you have what you need.
Yeah. And there's an
But
old
it sounds easier than it
sounds,
probably
yeah,
looks.
yeah, for sure. Definitely sounds, it's simple. It's definitely not easy. And there's a saying, and I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but that man cannot worship two masters. And if you're worshiping the master of money, it means you can't worship the master of your happiness, your aliveness, your soul's deepest calling. You're already worshiping a master. You can't worship two. And so I love the conversation of prioritizing, because when I first get to this with a lot of people, they have like 6 things as their top priority. I'm like, no, that's actually not how it works. That's not how the hierarchy works. The priorities work is like, you actually need to decide what is most important to you. And that's a wake up call for so many people. And I lied to myself for a long time around it. I thought it was one thing, and it's not that it was lying. I just didn't fully understand the whole truth. And there's a great book called Everyone Lies, and it kind of unpacks this, is that we're only saying the truth at the level where we're currently at. And so if we're at this level of scarcity, if we're at this level of the consumerism and the consumption, it's like, yeah, of course, I want more money. That's my truth. But as we get deeper, we find deeper truths. And that's what I'm committed to. That's what I help people get to. Because I don't ever tell anyone what their unique thing is. But as we dig away, I notice there's a lot of similarities for most people. And as we get to the deepest, I find that just about everyone is doing their best with what they know, with what they have. They want to help. They want to make the world a better place, and they're trying to do that with the best tools and resources that they have. And so I really believe that that's true. And so my goal and my commitment is to helping people with the tools and resources so that they can actually do that more and better and experience that ripple of impact.
Chris, this was a great conversation. I just want to say thank you for being here. And if listeners and viewers want to know more about how to work with you, get in touch with your teachings and your coaching, how can they find you?
Yeah, the best place that has all of it is chrismarhefka.com. Also, Chris Marhefka on Instagram. I post everything that I'm doing there. And they can find everything from the mentorship stuff to I run a men's program as well called 13 Pines. They can find all of that through my personal sites. So
And we'll definitely make sure all that's in the show notes for anybody who wants to look that up and find out more. So we've had I think it's been a great conversation. Do you have any final thoughts before I let you go?
one that comes to me is the topic of your show, and it's kind of like a parting summary and word of advice to take a deep breath, let it go, and then maybe do that a few more times and give yourself a moment, allow yourself a moment to slow down, to let the mind slow down, to let the breathing, the body slow down, and just be surprised by the miracles that unfold when you continuously do that, and the clarity that comes. All the answers that everyone is seeking in their life already exist within them. And it's simply just a excavation process, like digging for gold. And the breath and slowing down is the first step in that. So that would be the last thing I would leave people with, is just a whole wrap up, is taking a nice deep breath.
Well said. And hopefully you all joined us with a nice inhale and exhale at the end of this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kendra.
Well, I hope that you agree that today's conversation was fun and grounding as much as I did. And as you move through your week, think about one small habit that you can shift. Whatever you're consuming or doing that you want to change, just slightly change it. Because when we slow down enough to notice what matters, we create space for more of it. So notice how it feels in your body when you do that activity. Do you feel good? Do you want to do more of it? Make space in your day. So you do that every day to feel a little bit better. And if this episode brought a smile to your face or a shift in your perspective, share it with someone who could use a little more happiness in their life. And as always, I'm so grateful for you to be here listening in every week, doing this work with us, alongside of us, choosing intention and building a life that feels good from the inside out. Just remember, until next time, the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.